Hello everyone and welcome to OTT Question Time. My name is Koza Kanji, I'm the editor of VOD Professional. This week we are talking about building an OTT service from scratch. This is part one of a two-part series. Joining me on the panel to discuss this topic today are Nick, if we can start with you.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Nick Wilson. I'm the head of customer success at TiVo, now Xperi. I'm on the panel today to talk about how to build an OTT service, why TiVo is relevant in that conversation is we offer both end-to-end solutions and component solutions in order to allow people to either work with one or a smaller group of vendors in order to deliver an OTT service or provide components like recommendations, metadata, viewership data, and analytics tools in order to build a more piecemeal solution.
Thanks, Nick. Ralph.
Hello, I'm Ralph from Axonom. I'm CEO in Axonom. And what we are doing content management since 2001. So for a long period of time. In the very beginning, it was not focused on streaming, but let's say with the introduction of DRM and with the introduction of more serious streaming platforms and protection. So we are starting to build OTT platforms for a long period of time, reinvented the wheel several times due to technology changes and needs. So yeah, so this is why I'm on this panel, I guess, Kaja, right?
Well, yes, well, thank you. And Brenda, finally.
Hi, I'm Brenda Gradick. I'm Vice President of Go-to-Market Strategy and Product Marketing for Brightcove. Brightcove has been a leader in the video technology space since 2004 and have been powering the back end of OTT apps, I think, since the beginning. But we now offer end-to-end solutions as well as the components for companies that are building their OTT solution in-house or through a partner.
Great, Brenda, thank you very much. Right, so I'm going to start by asking a question which might sound slightly odd, which is the title of this session is about building an OTT service from scratch. But hasn't this already been settled? You know, haven't the big broadcasters already got OTT service? Why is this topic still relevant, and who is it relevant to? Ralph, you've been, as you say, doing this a long time, and you've been in the industry a long time. Let's start with you on this. Why are we talking about this?
So I think, first of all, technology never stops, and streaming OTT internet is about technology. So you basically permanently have to have a look on how everything develops, what you can use, and so on and so forth. So I believe that this is that's a principle of having streaming platforms. And the other thing is like the development in the past years. So you do see in the years that more and more services you need to offer. You need to have like recommendation engines, payment systems, advertising, etc. So you need a lot of services to monetize your content, and this gets more and more complicated technology-wise, and there are new solutions for that. And this is why you need to have a look on, either restructuring what you have or building it from scratch.
Brenda, same question to you. Who is this relevant to, this question, this topic?
Well, I do think it's relevant to all. The traditional OTT players were already in the media space in some capacity, so they had an in-house team that could pivot to develop an OTT solution. What we're seeing now is this emergence of pure play OTT services that are either very technically oriented, so they can follow in those footsteps and build the technical backend with some sort of hybrid model, or more often now we're starting to see a content oriented OTT player come in, and they're really focused on delivering the right content to a very specific audience, and they're looking for a technical solution that just works on the back end. So those are very different scenarios, but the technology evolution it does require the traditional players to keep up and continue to evolve and innovate. And then there's this need for an end-to-end solution that just allows a content provider to focus on their content.
Okay, and we're definitely going to come to the different approaches to building an OTT service from scratch in a couple of minutes. Nick, who are your customers at TiVo other than broadcasters? Which other use groups are we talking about that are looking at OTT services and either building them or restructuring them, as Brenda said?
Yeah, so we have customers all over the spectrum, right? Pay TV operators who are looking to build OTT focused services now that are available just on customer owned devices. We work with the broadcasters, like you said. We work with content owners. We work with advertisers who are looking to build platforms that can be embedded into OTT apps. And I think Ralph hit on a really important point a minute ago, which is, you asked the question about who is this relevant to? I think it's everyone, right? We live in a world where Facebook, Netflix, these guys are releasing once or twice a week updates to their apps with new features or new functionality. And those are kind of what I would call micro level improvements, but that's an expectation for consumers across all industries now. And you also have new trends. 3 years ago, the conversation about monetization of users was much different than it is in the AVOD world that we live in now. And so I think everyone has to constantly be moving. And I don't think the amount of work for someone like Fox to do is any less than the amount of work for someone who's trying to break into the space, because the features that new entrant is going to be trying to build are the same ones that Fox or CBS or any other network or broadcaster needs to be building in order to stay relevant.
Which other verticals as well is this relevant to? Because Ralph, I mean, you guys work famously in aerospace as well as M&E.
Excuse me. Yeah, we do work in aerospace as well and in the media business. So we actually came from the media side, and 10 years ago, due to digital rights management and the usage of personal devices in aircraft, we entered this space as well. And today we are building applications for Delta. We are building applications for a lot of players, connectivity providers, and so on. And we do mainly entertainment. So who is this relevant to? Yeah, basically for everybody. And entertainment enters into all types of spaces, being it like a train or being at your home or even your office, corporate TV, etc. So you have the classic broadcasters, you have the classic media companies, but you do also have a lot of other players in place. And the technology and the way how to monetize it and the way how business models are built is really also unique to the different players. To a content owner is different than to a Delta airline, and it's different to somebody who is doing like a cable, wants to move from cable TV. So I think, yeah. So yeah. We see really many different ways how content is distributed.
Over the years, I've been involved in a few OTT project builds as well. And let's then talk about the approaches that you can take to building an OTT service. So broadly speaking, I've worked out, I think that there are kind of 4.5, I guess. We kind of walked through all of these, well, at least the 4 earlier. So Nick, do you want to kick us off with talking about legacy builds?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you look at building an OTT service, you've got to evaluate where I'll say the customer, where the builder is coming from, right? Do they have legacy services that they want to continue to support or look at? Is it totally greenfield solution? And what you wind up with is this, you call it 4.5 solutions. I would say it's a sliding scale that ranges from someone like Comcast, who has the ability to build every component of a solution on their own with no oversight. And then you get into the middle where you have someone who has the technical sophistication to pick a couple of vendors and build the glue themselves. And then kind of the bucket where someone may choose different vendors so they get best of breed and hire an SI to bundle together, versus someone who needs a package with a bow in it. And all they can have is they say, we need someone to come and drop this solution in and make it work. And so it's really interesting to see how size of customer, kind of ARPU of the customer base, and then overall technical sophistication of the customer plays in between. And it's interesting, you have people like HBO who have built up really strong technical organizations over the years through various acquisitions and other projects, and some customers who may be the same size and just don't have that same skill set. We run into that a lot in the operator space as well.
Actually, let's just step back and enumerate what those 4.5 actually are. So first of all, there's the build it all yourself, right? You do everything yourself. Number 2 is that you don't build any of it yourself. You give it entirely to all the vendors, the entire project. The third one is some sort of hybrid model, as you said, Nick, which is on the spectrum of how much do we do in-house versus how much do we farm out to the specialist vendors. And then the fourth one, Brenda, is using an end-to-end service like Brightcove. Yeah?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, wait, I think the other day when we were talking, you had a fifth though.
Yeah, and so the 4.5 one is to do something like a Disney, which is buy a BAMTech, and use BAMTech as the sort of super supplier that you've bought in-house to do the majority of the work. That said, Disney actually still does use third parties. It does use external vendors as well. So of the 4, then, can we all agree that nobody does it entirely themselves anymore? Or are there companies out there that would still countenance building an OTT service from scratch entirely themselves?
I think it depends where you draw the line, right? If you look at some of the really large pay TV providers, there are some of those that are doing it themselves. I think both in Europe and in the States for their OTT service, but it's very, very rare. I would say very few.
Why would they do it themselves?
Pride of ownership.
Historically.
Sorry, Ralph, go on.
Sorry, Nick. I think it's also during the time. It's also something that just grew up like that. So if you do have broadcasters that let's say a public broadcaster in the UK, when they were in very early times, they have been around, and they managed to get something to the web and stream their content. They built up internal teams because basically you did not have 5, 6, 7 years ago, you had no other chance than to try to do it yourself. There were not enough vendors on the market. It just, you take them and you can build a really full scale platform. And the other thing is you do have your broadcast business, and you're in the beginning, it was all try to be attached to that somehow. So there was quite a complexity already in-house you needed to know. So actually only teams in-house could really build this bridge. And I think this grows and grows and grows and grows. I mean, in the end, you have a bigger organization internally. If this is efficient today, and if this is the right way to move on, is another question. But I think it's explainable why in the last 10 years you see a lot of companies that have big in-house teams, but still also these try to understand what they can buy in, what they need to build themselves. And I think the main topic is really how do you keep control over whatever grows there, either it's like service oriented or if it's a monolithic thing. I think I'm with Nick here, what he said. Service orientation is a super important technical, to build everything built up on services, even if you do it in-house.
Yeah.
But still to keep all services, even services under control is not that easy.
So the advantages of building yourself are that it's bespoke, and that it totally works for you and your organization. But I guess the disadvantages are that by the time you implement it, it might already be kind of obsolete, and that there are specialist vendors that can do a better job anyway, right? Is that fair?
Right.
Brenda?
I think that's fair, and I agree with what Ralph said. You've got a legacy system. You've built up this very complex solution. It's not only hard from a pride perspective to walk away, but it's hard technically to walk away, to just completely rebuild. But that said, you are faced with the challenge of efficiency, where you can go to a specialist vendor that's all they're focused on, and they're innovating every day around one area. That's where you get ahead more quickly than if you've got this giant organization that is trying to just fix what's immediately in front of them.
So in that case, on the second one then, right, so the first one is that you do it all yourself, but we know that hardly anybody does that. The second option is that you give the whole thing to external suppliers. What are the disadvantages and advantages with that model? And does anybody actually do that in reality? Nick, you're on mute.
Of course I am. Sorry. I think that you, I think there are people that do that. To be honest, we have customers that do that who talk to us and say, hey, we don't have the technical capability. We don't have the staff, whatever it may be, to do this ourselves. Can you bring in or work with us to bring in the set of vendors that can deliver a full end-to-end solution? The pros of that, I think, are exactly that, is it covers up for organizations that are at capacity already, right? There are a lot of these smaller entrants, whether it's small pay TV providers, whether it's small broadcasters, whether it's upstart OTT providers, who look at their value prop. And if it isn't in the technical delivery of the service, they may say, hey, the most cost-effective way for us to do this is to work with vendors. And by outsourcing every part, we can get people who are experts in each individual area that they work in, right? Like, there are a number of companies out there, TiVo being one of them, that are very good at search and recommendations. And that's something that takes some education to get really good at. There are a handful of vendors, again, TiVo being one of them, that provide entertainment focused voice solutions. And that's another thing where the technical investment to do that from scratch is really large. Building CMSs, building great user experiences, all of those things require not just people, not just technical ability, but also some real domain knowledge. And it's not always easy to source people, and it's not always easy to be an expert in everything.
So in that case, if you're another way of using, as opposed to using lots of external vendors to do individual pieces of the supply chain, Brenda, it would be potentially for a company like Brightcove to do an end-to-end solution. Sorry, this is sounding like a straight infomercial, yeah, but you are germane to the conversation in this section, so go for it. What does Brightcove do here with it? I mean, does it supply an end-to-end solution?
We supply an end-to-end solution, but we do have flexibility where if there is a specialty, some of the capabilities Nick was speaking of, we have open APIs. We can bring in, if you need a specialty voice component for your industry, we can offer that as well. But at its heart, we launched Brightcove Beacon a year ago. That does offer you can step in. We manage the technical aspect, and we just did it for ourselves, right? Our event team launched an OTT app called Play TV because our annual conference was canceled, and our events team was the client and built their own app without any technology or any technical background. So it is possible, and then they were able to focus on building the content, right? And not having to worry about the technical capabilities. So we offer that end-to-end piece, but we also play a component part in probably just as many OTT services that our customers build.
Good. By the way, if I look slightly flustered, it's because a courier is trying to deliver something to me, and my phone is buzzing at the same time. Yeah, but ignore live TV, huh? Right, fine. So we've talked about doing it yourself, farming it out to all the specialist suppliers, using an end-to-end solution. In reality, everybody does the fourth thing, right? Mostly, I guess, which is using a hybrid solution. Exactly as you say, Nick. Along the spectrum, doing a bit yourself, farming a bit out, or using a Brightcove or an Excedo or somebody like that.
Yeah, I think that's true, right? And part of, and not to plug, our TiVo too much, but I think you see a lot of people, to Brenda's point, who offer kind of both solutions, right? We have an end-to-end solution we offer where we plug in a bunch of our components, but we sell those independently as well, because
yeah.
I think what you've seen is a lot of the vendors and people who work in this space acknowledging exactly what you said, right? Is there isn't a one size fits all in this anymore. It's part of why you have the breadth of different OTT apps that you have. If there was something that worked for everyone, I think you'd see a lot more. A, there wouldn't be as many players in the space, and B, you would see a lot more consistency between the apps. And I think there are some user experience things that we see that work, but depending on how much original content someone has, depending on how much, how much reruns, how much new runs, they have. It depends on the amount, how much live content they have. It really impacts what type of recommendations are you doing? What type of discovery experience do you want? What's the home screen look like? Where do you direct users?
Yeah.
How are you monetizing the service impacts that as well, right? Are you trying to drive people to ad supported content, or are you a subscription only service where that doesn't play a part?
In the chat window, everybody, I'm just going to post an article that that I wrote a few years back, and it was a briefing for new staff that were joining VOD Pro that hadn't worked in the industry before. And the reason I'm posting it here is if you do a search for the word York in the article, you'll get to section 8 toward the bottom, where I have an analogy in my head and have had for a long time about legacy OTT builds, which kind of are like, to me, like London, which was that historically London was a bunch of disparate villages that sort of grew organically into this one whole. So London is a mess, yeah, in terms of, you know, the streets are higgledy-piggledy and it's a bit all over the place and it's not massively efficient in terms of residential versus business areas, but London is charming and it works and it's bespoke and it's kind of cool. So in my head, that's legacy, whereas the alternative is New York, where you have a chance to go completely greenfield and figure things out in advance, put things in grids and nice sort of efficient centers. So you can read about that in the piece that I just posted there. Let's then talk about minimum viable products, yeah, and getting your OTT service to market. So again, this time not to plug VOD Pro, yeah, but I'm posting a different piece. Actually, no, first of all, I'll share the screen. So here's a piece I wrote a couple of years ago about building an OTT service from scratch, and in it, I've noted down some of the different areas of the supply chain. So if you were building an OTT service from scratch, these are some of the areas that you'd need to address. And I think we found that there are about 28 of them. Yeah, I'll post a link to this piece so that you can look at it at your leisure afterwards. But if I stop sharing the screen and go back to the panelists and ask them, right, of these different areas, if you're trying to get an OTT service to market, what are the must-haves versus the sort of nice-to-haves? Yeah, what do you absolutely need? Ralph, again, I'm going to turn to you first on this.
I think I would like. So what you absolutely need is to control all of them you select. What I believe is what Nick referred to say, okay, there are customers asking him, like saying, okay, can you build up a solution? But Nick also referred to, okay, but then we also select the services, perhaps behind the scenes from others. So you're basically, your domain knowledge is important here to know, like, what do you need to use, how can you use them, and how can you integrate them. So I believe the important thing you need to consider is whatever services you select, because it's depending on your business model. Do you need DRM? Do you need advertising? What types of payment models do you need? We build a service in India. You need other payment models than in Europe and other payment models in US. So the question is, from the back end perspective, not talking about the user front end, how do you keep control of all of the services? So even if you choose them from different vendors, if you have API-driven services, but how do you control them? How do you basically keep an overview over that? And we believe that a new technology approach of micro front ends can give an answer to that. So where you can have a control, where every front end basically is controlled by their own service and then brought into one user experience. So we think that the next years will be a lot around that, because you have fragmented services and you do have an issue. How do you actually all control and compose them together? So if you choose like 4 or 5, or if you choose 50, what I'm sure in the future, there will be more, not less. So you will have more services, AI, whatever comes into the game. And you basically do need to get a control over them and not lose the control. And so I think that is the first thought you need to think about. If you build a service best of breed, you do need to think about how do you control that.
Okay, which is a good answer. Yeah, but which of these areas, or am I thinking about this in a kind of legacy way? Yeah, should I be thinking about it in a newer way? Is it not looking at a list of the sort of areas, the processes in the glass to glass process, and identifying which ones I absolutely need to have?
I think you should not look on it and in the way of it sounds like each service you add adds pain to you. So what is the minimum services you should choose that you do not have a lot of pain?
Right.
I don't see it like that. I think the services have to be made in a way, built in a way. You should choose the services which are built in a way that are API driven, so that you are able to orchestrate them. If every service you add adds pain to you, you should think about the service you add, or if it's the right company that builds the service, and perhaps you get the service from another company built in another way.
Right. But it might add pain. It might add pain to you, but your users need it. Yeah, your viewers. So deal with it. Brenda, am I thinking about this wrong as well? Is this am I too much of a legacy guy? Is there a new way of building an OTT service that doesn't have to look at the elements of the glass to glass process?
Well, I would contend that you're both right, but maybe you're both a little bit looking at it through a narrow lens. Not that I look at it through a wider lens, but you do have the must-haves, right? Just like when you're building a house, you have to have a foundation, you have to have walls, you have to have a roof. So there are those must-haves that you could not have an OTT service without. And those are, just literally getting the video ingested, encoded, transcoded, storage, delivery, etc. And then the emerging must-haves that we're seeing are, around data. So what is your content data strategy, your metadata strategy? What is your, do you have user level analytics? And then do you have a plan to use the data that you're gathering? What is your security? That's a must-have just in today's world. What are your user management tools that you're bringing in? But Ralph is spot on in terms of it depends on your business model. And then there's also building for an evolving business model. I think what we see is many of our customers who are built on AVOD are now having to look at other monetization models, test those out. Maybe they're standing up multiple OTT services that are essentially testing those different monetization models. So what's our free what's our free service look like? What's our and that might be AVOD. What's our subscription service look like? And those might be standalone, or they might be built within that same OTT service. But the ability, thinking ahead to your point with the London versus New York model, New York wasn't built at once, but it was built with a plan of how do we expand. So if we're not thinking about how do we keep expanding in a way that supports an evolving business model, and here are the 3 scenarios that we need to plan for, and are we ready for that? So multiple monetization strategies. What's our user experience expectation? What's our content shelving strategy? What kind of live or simulated live channels do we need to compete, because we need to draw a user in and not get them stuck in that 7 minutes it takes to choose what they're going to watch. So I think all of those are emerging must-haves, but your final list of must-haves is 100% dependent on the business model that you're going out with.
Nick, you guys at TiVo have recently been writing. You've written about a data-driven strategy for building new OTT services.
Yeah, we actually we released a white paper, and I apologize if my connection gets bad, but my power went out at my house, and so I'm hotspotted off of my phone. So hopefully it works. But yeah, I think that, so we released a white paper a few weeks ago that looks at exactly what Brenda was talking about, right? What are the key metrics that you need as you're building a service? And a part of what we offer out of our kind of our search and recommendations business is analytics around service consumption, and consultative services on top of that go to how do you apply these to build a best in breed solution. And so The paper talks about what are the key indicators of success of the service, right? Effective catalog size. How many of your assets are an average user actually seeing over their lifespan in your app? What's the click-through rate? How long does it take users to discover content? And we've tied a lot of these stats back to, or a lot of these analytics back to, the likelihood that a user churns and subscriber life cycle. I offer for anyone to go to our website and download it, tivo.com.
Yeah.
Trends reports and number of other free industry white papers that are available to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll definitely post a link. Nick, you're welcome to post a link actually in the chat section if you can find it. But that's data that people gather from having run an OTT service for a while, right?
Yeah, and I think that's, you talk, everyone did a great job talking about the different components. I think Brenda had a really good analogy about, you build a house, you need walls, you need a roof. I think that data is kind of the piece that not everybody realizes they need at this point, right? The ability to be smart about it. Earlier, I talked about how that, as you move through, there are new trends that you need to be able to adapt to. And I think data is not necessarily a new trend you need to adapt to. It's kind of the one that people have forgotten along the way. And in Brenda's house analogy, the ability to gather that data and make use of it is kind of like having a dishwasher and a washer and dryer, right? Like, you may not need those in your house, but after about a week, if you don't have them, you're going to be sitting there going, man, I really made a mistake not building this into the house. And so what we see is people are getting smarter and smarter about data. Ralph talked earlier about AI, machine learning, like the ability to take, it's one of the things that TiVo's invested a lot in. It's one of the things that drove us to write this white paper is as kind of an industry get better about the different ways we're able to utilize the end subscriber data we have, there's an unlimited amount we can do with it, whether it's targeted advertising, whether it's evaluation of the effectiveness of ad campaigns that advertisers are running, whether it's evaluating how we're building the service, whether it's looking at what we're doing in the service that isn't working. For us, we really view this as part of the engine that drives everything we're doing, whether it's just the success of our search and recommendations business, whether it's our end-to-end offering, whether it's the accuracy of our metadata, right? Sometimes the fact that some content isn't being viewed is a fact that you may not have images, or you may just have low quality images for that asset. And this is something that we've learned through utilizing that data over time.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so please do send your questions in. There's a Q&A panel at the bottom there, and there's also a chat window too. We've already had a question, which I'll come to in a couple of minutes. I guess my last round of questions are that I mentioned that this was the first of a two-parter on building an OTT service from scratch. So nominally, this is the sort of, as I said, first principles and back-end conversation. In terms of the data that we do know is out there is about where the users are, which platforms they're on, which devices they're using as well. So is that something that if you are building an OTT service now in 2020 in this environment that you have to be mindful of? I mean, which are the platforms that we're talking about anyway? Where is the audience? Brenda, you guys produce a report, helpfully, that looks at this kind of thing once in a while. Is it quarterly or is it biannual? Or?
It is quarterly, and we've just pushed out the Q2 video index report that we publish out, and it looks at actual streaming data. So we do plenty of research where we ask people what they do, what they watch, where they watch it, but then this report is actually based on streaming data from across our customer base. And what we are seeing is, you're absolutely right, you have to look at the platforms. I think there's a lot of focus on trying to get on as many platforms as you can, which can be important if that's true to your audience. There's a balance though, right? You can over-index on either side of it. You can do what Quibi did and go all in on smartphones, which from a data perspective makes total sense, right? Over half of video starts today are on a smartphone. We predict that within the next 5 years, it'll be about 70% of video starts are on a smartphone. So Quibi went all in, but it didn't work for them, right? Because they weren't also offering that lean back experience on a connected TV. All views went up this year, right? Everybody was sitting at home. So across the board, everyone was watching more television. We saw 160% increase in connected TV video views, but that still only takes them to about 3% of total video views. So connected TVs are important and they're growing, but they're growing off of a small base. So if you overlook something like smartphones because you think, oh, people won't watch long form content on smartphones, and so you go all in on connected TV, you may be missing that device to device experience that we know consumers are looking for.
3% connected TVs in the States, or?
That's a global number.
Right, okay. And where is the data drawn from? So it's Europe, North America, LATAM?
APAC as well. So across the board, we have quite a bit of our report actually, and I'd be happy to put a link in. Our analysts would love that, so I'll do that in a moment. But our report covers, we go with a deep dive, I think, on 8 different countries, including all of APAC, Japan, Korea, Australia, in addition to Europe. And
the reason I'm asking is just because the connected TV number of only 3%, yeah, just seems super low. Rough?
I'm not sure if this is this the distribution of minutes watched on a TV through streaming, or is this a TV that is smart TV?
It's video
smart
starts.
TV.
Yeah, it's video starts.
So and
absolutely,
Apple TV is also
total
to that.
views.
Okay,
Yes.
so if I have a Fire Stick, it also counts to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So video starts. Okay, how you start crazy amount of videos when you just scroll your Facebook down. So
Yes.
so I would say if you probably have a look on the minute consumption, probably it will not be 3%. At least I would guess so.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, like even if you would have 70% or 80% smartphone and 20% TV, who is just who is kicking out 20% of market share? I think it's relevant to have a look where your users are. It's relevant where you have a look where your target group is. But actually, from the technology perspective, it gets more and more aligned to build the platforms for different devices. So it's less and less expensive to actually really support technology from the technology perspective, like a Smart 4 or an Xbox or a TV or your mobile device. So I think this gets less relevant. The question is still where you put your focus on, where you put most of the features on, etc. So how do you use the device as well? That is for sure a question. And here you have to have a look on your target group. But if we talk about streaming video, you should be present. I mean, you should, I don't know how to really exclude something, or you have really a very, very special interest of whatever, like 30 seconds videos that you only have in a whatever kind of thread. But I think
it's a balance,
yes,
right? It's a balance because every device you add is another device to maintain, make sure you've got the right content strategy for that device. From a technical backend standpoint, there's maintenance required. So it is a balance. I mean, when we launched Play TV, which is to a B2B audience, right? I mean, that's very much a corporate TV type of approach. We included the connected TVs. We're on Roku and Apple TV. And part of that was because we wanted to showcase our product, right? Like, hey, look, we've got a product that can be easily built out, not just for the not just for web, but for smartphones. But we actually see almost as many views on our connected TV, so Apple TV and Roku, as we do on web for that B2B audience. So it'll be interesting as we go back to new normal if that continues, or if that is a result of the everyone staying at home. But I think it's definitely important to not lock into just one or two devices in order to give your viewers options.
That's a really good place actually to address the question that we've had so far, which is from Tony Havelka, which is that and Tony asks, how do you control costs? Because every third-party service you add will add costs, monthly costs. Most services are also fixed fee services that don't usually reflect the size and growth of your service. Yeah, so all profits and then some could be going to third-party service instead of being directed to increasing the audience. Let's split that question out actually and talk about costs. Yeah, is it true to say that every third-party service that you add, every additional platform you want to be on, will incur more costs? Nick, is that the model at TiVo?
So we actually don't charge additional by device, and the way we charge is different. We also do a subscriber based billing, because we see our costs go up also in order to support a service as the number of subscribers go up, because you have hosting fees and support overhead, and all of those things generally increase linearly with the number of, or in part linearly with the number of services. But yeah. I think what you do incur is additional support overhead for having more devices. I think he's also talking about third-party services. The more vendors you have involved, that does also, right? It adds not just vendor cost, but overhead cost as well. And so I think there's definitely a fine line here, right, between where one may not give you the flexibility that you want, but if you had 28 vendors for each of the different areas you talked about, the cost becomes significant because there's overhead on each one of those. I think the other key here to keep in mind, though, is a lot of times working with a third party that is splitting those costs across you and a handful of other customers for R&D and development and otherwise is cheaper than trying to do it in-house, because we have, let's say, 20 customers in North America who deploy our end-to-end solution. It's much more cost effective to do R&D once for 20 customers rather than 20 customers each doing it one time. It just adds up really fast the more that you have to do in-house.
Yeah. Actually, let's talk about costs a little bit more, because I've done this a few times over the years as well for different broadcasters that I work for. In terms of when you're using an external vendor, Brenda Brightco's model might be slightly different, but is it fair to say that we're looking at, first of all, there's usually some sort of license cost? Ralph, I'm looking at you here, particularly. There's usually some sort of license cost. Then there's a sort of an OPEX, an operation cost. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. So the question was to me?
Yeah.
So, okay. So I think what we did. So to answer the question, is it true that you add more services and you add more costs? Yes, and I think this is natural. And even if you buy all the services in one box, somebody has to develop it and somebody has to offer it to you. But to the structure of the cost, I think that is an important thing. So first of all, like we do also provide services based on our framework. So we have the framework to control services, to integrate third-party services, and you can use services we have built. Like you can use like an image service, DRM, you can use asset management, you can use the catalog service for providing content to the front end. So, but you can also use another one. What we are doing, we are orchestrating them. Now to the costs. If you're doing costs, what we did, we were basically removing all fixed costs. So we said, okay, we had that in the past, but we said in the future, we don't want to do that. We want to grow with the service. So you have the costs are transparent. If you have a look on the DRM, the costs are transparent on the DRM. You can see, okay, how many licenses do you use? If you have many licenses, you pay more. If you have less licenses, you pay less. What kind of service do you want to have? So all of this is basically something which is, I think, important in the service world. So if you're really entering into a world of services, you do need to offer to your customer something where he can really start, let's say, from scratch with a smaller audience, and then really grow. And you should not, what the question was about, I think you should actually not eat the money that actually your customer needs to grow, and then basically you cannot earn from it because he cannot grow. So I think we as vendors also need to keep that in mind to enable the platforms, because we are basically benefiting from platforms coming up, corporate TV coming up, education TV coming up. And we need to enable all of them really to get their growth. For sure, I want to earn money when they are really successful, going up with services we provide, all good. But yeah, I think we need to be careful on this fixed cost.
I remember when that model came out, by the way, the idea of the more successful you are, the more successful we are. Yeah, vendors would say that in their proposals. I'm trying to remember, somebody used an acronym for that once, and I was like, come on. Yeah, but actually it does make sense. Yeah. Are there any other costs that people should be thinking about? Because it used to be CapEx heavy, didn't it? There was always, as you say, Ralph, you know, there was a fixed fee first, yeah, which was quite big, and that CapEx can still be there, but the CapEx was the license fee, and then the operating costs, yeah, were the success part. Yeah, the more users you have, the more devices you have, the more platforms you're on.
The more complex your solution is and the more individual your solution is, the more CapEx you have, because you do need to individualize it. On the other hand, it also reflects your business model. If you have a unique business model, most likely there will not be the technology on the market that is exactly fulfilling this unique idea. No. So being it from the design, from your brand, from the UX, from the data you would like to join with each other and analyze with each other. So I think that's rather complicated. The more complex you think, probably the more CapEx you will have.
All right, look, we've run out of time. So I'm going to ask one more question, which was a quick fire one, basically, which is, look, it's been a pretty crazy year, right? With everything that's been going on in the world. Are you guys all still kind of optimistic about the industry and about OTT services in general from both the M&E industry but also other verticals? Is it going to be a better year later this year and next year as well? So let's just do it in the order that I can see you. I guess this is a yes/no. Nick?
Yeah, I think I'm optimistic about the industry. I think people are consuming more video. I think the ways they're consuming video are changing. And change creates opportunity for new ways of thinking, new approaches to problems, and I think new cool stuff to continue to come out of the industry.
Perfectly said as head of customer success. Ralph?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we are working also for the aviation business, so we got quite a hard hit, but we see the future actually really, like, this was just a little bump in the transition, because you do have a lot of transition going on everywhere with video and streaming and learning and corporate and so on. So I see a really nice future for all of this business.
Good. And Brenda, finally.
Yes, I'm very optimistic. We look at this as, it's been a tough year, absolutely, for everyone. But from a video perspective, it's an evolutionary moment, right? Because people are dependent upon video now, and so we're seeing customers innovating to get through that change. We're seeing corporations and brands say, okay, I can't do my physical event, so why not just go all the way in and become a broadcaster? And embrace this, and they're taking advantage of that innovation opportunity, which is really exciting. So all the predictions over the past decade of where video is going are suddenly, it's like we hit fast forward and are landing on the other side of it. So it's definitely a force for change.
Great. Look, thank you very much, everybody. Next week we are doing part 2 of building an OTT service from scratch, where we're going to be looking at front end, obviously. I'd like to thank my panelists, Nick Wilson from TiVo, Ralph Wagner from Axonom, and Brenda Graybeck from Brightcove. The video for this session will be available on Monday on the VodPro website, and you guys will get a link for it via email. Hope to see you next Thursday. Thank you very much.